Hi, and welcome to another video by our Facebook group, Gardening for Beginners. Today, we're going to provide you some examples of materials that you can obtain to make your own free compost that will compost in 4 to 8 weeks. It can be used either for a compost bin or a compost heap. Just keep in mind, if you want to compost it within that 4 to 8 weeks, you'll want to use something like a composter or a compost bin. You can use this information to set up a compost heap outside. Just keep in mind, when you put those materials in there, they may not compost within the 4 to 8 weeks because you have to consider things like the temperature outside as well as the internal temperature of your compost heap. Before we get into that, if you are interested, please join our Facebook group, Gardening for Beginners. If you've seen some of these videos in the past and you've enjoyed them, I invite you to click on that icon right there. That will subscribe you to our channel. Thank you for indulging me on those two topics. And with that out of the way, let's talk about composting. In order for these materials to break down into usable compost, you need the right combination of what's commonly referred to as greens and browns. Green material are typically living plant material or recently living plant material, and brown material is going to be older dead plants. The most common one that I can think of is going to be paper products, for example, or I should say the right type of paper products. What you would do in the event of a compost pile or a compost heap, you would layer brown and green materials on top of each other and then use a pitchfork or a shovel to turn them over to aerate the soil. In my case, I'm using a compost bin. I'm using the Compost Wizard Junior. You would mix in those brown and green materials together, and then you would turn it every day or so for the exact same reasons, to aerate the soil. That's about as deep as I'm going to get into composting in here. I'm working under the assumption that you understand how compost works and you're more interested in free compost materials and how to obtain them, and that you already have an understanding of how everything works. I also want to say that this list is not complete. It's not all-inclusive by any stretch of the imagination. I specifically chose these materials looking at two different standards. Number one, can it be obtained for free? Number two, does it compost quickly? Using those two, I came up with this list. So I do understand there are going to be other materials out there that are just going to take a little bit longer to compost, so I'm not going to include those in this video. So let's first talk about free brown, carbon-rich options for composting material. The most common one that most of us should have easy access to are going to be toilet paper rolls. Everybody poops, right? Depending on the size of your family, you might have more access to this stuff than others. On a related note, paper towel rolls are another option. Save your dryer lint too. Keep a paper or plastic bag near the dryer and it'll get full pretty fast. Another typically pretty easy option is going to be newspaper. The ink on the paper should be soy-based, which is fine. Look into it if you're concerned. Also, don't use the glossy paper that you typically see, glossy paper like this that you're going to see in ads. That's not going to be good for composting at all. Speaking of newspaper, keep an eye out for mailers from grocers like this one that I have here from HEB. A lot of times I'll get these once or twice a week. You just add them to the pile. They're going to add up quick too. Last but not least, get your hands on as much as you can of cardboard. If you're worried about the ink on the outside of it, whether it's going to be good or bad for compost, one thing that I've noticed is that you can sprinkle a little bit of water on it. If the water beads, don't use it. If it absorbs the water, it's probably safe to use. And as I said before, if you're worried, ask wherever the cardboard originated from. They might be able to tell you. So how do I get so much of this stuff? Creativity. Always try to have it in the back of your mind to keep an eye out for them, and you'll be surprised at how much you can gather in 4 to 8 weeks. Since it takes about that long to compost when conditions are ideal, you can build a rotation where you always have materials ready when you're ready to make a new batch. For the toilet paper rolls, for example, not only do I keep collect these at home, I also collect them from work too. The same goes with cardboard material. Whenever my store gets a shipment of something, what I do is I grab the cardboard when we're done unpacking it and I throw it in my car. I'll also save cardboard at home when I get stuff in from retailers like Amazon. And if I'm being completely transparent, I do take a peek at the dumpster behind my store at work for boxes that other stores may have thrown away as well. There aren't any food places near me, so when I dumpster dive, the boxes, they're clean and I'm not really worried about how sanitary they are or not. And like I said, get creative within your own personal limits. With the newspaper, one thing I sometimes do is I'll go to local businesses. For example, I went to a pharmacy recently and I asked if I could have all the old newspapers. I noticed that they had, it was like on a Friday and they had newspapers from Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So I asked her if I could have those. I explained to her what I was using it for and she was happy to donate them to my cause. Don't expect all businesses to do that, but every now and then you'll run into someone that's happy to help. Friends and neighbors are also a good source of newspapers. For example, I was at my girlfriend's place and I noticed that she had, just a small stack of newspapers on her table. Of course, she let me have them. So with all this paper stuff, you can tear them up by hand, but if you have a paper shredder, that would be ideal. It's much easier and quicker. There are two different types of cuts, and I want to show you what those look like. You're going to have the cross cut and the micro cut. So micro cut is probably the most common type of cut. You see how long, this is a cross cut, I should say. That's going to be your most common type of cut. Those shredders are going to typically be less expensive. The one that I use is going to be what's called a micro cut. And whoops, this is what it looks like right here. You see how much smaller it is? That's a big deal. I know it doesn't look like there's a huge difference between the micro cut and the cross cut, but when you keep in mind the active microorganisms that break down this compost are tiny, tiny, tiny. I mean, you can fit tens of thousands of these things just on the head of a pin. So when you have more surface area, even a difference between the cross cut and the micro cut, the surface area difference between those is huge. It also helps keep your cardboard from clumping with your coffee grounds. I get asked a lot about saving soiled paper towels. I just don't do it. I'm not familiar enough with the oils and fragrances that may be present in the soap I use, as well as the inks in the paper towels themselves. I don't know how it's going to impact the composting process or the completed composted material. Plus, as you can see right here, I have quite a bit of brown material to work with. This is just from a 2-month time period. You're probably looking at well over a pound of material in here, which is going to be more than enough for what we're going to need it for. So greens, the nitrogen-rich material that you're going to need in combination with the brown material, with my method, are pretty easy to come by. 2 words for you: coffee shops. I have 5 coffee shops that are on my way home from work. I only work about 15 minutes away from where I live. I've got 3 Starbucks and 2 mom and pops along the way. What I like to do is I'll call them in the morning and just let them know what I want to do, that I want to come by. Because in the past, what I've done is when I've gone by, they said, "Oh, you just missed it. We threw it away, a couple hours ago," or what have you. And stuff like that, I'm definitely not going to go into the dumpster to get. So with that in mind, just give them a heads up. let them know you're coming over. On one run from work to home, I can get anywhere from 20 to 50 pounds of coffee grounds. I know some of y'all out there want to increase the variety of materials that you put in your green materials for composting, and that's okay too. It's going to create a more diverse composting medium for you. A way that you can do that, what I like to do is I like to dive into my pantry and in my fridge to see what expired food items that I have. Things like stale crackers, pasta, veggies and fruits that you've just kind of let go for a little too long in the fridge. These are all things that you can add in along with it to, again, add a little bit more diversity to your composting. So we've talked about some of the materials that you can use in composting. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about materials that you shouldn't use. You need to stay away from cooked food, meats, dairy, and oils. There's different reasons for not using each of them, but you definitely want to stay away from those when you're composting. You're probably also wondering what type of ratios that you should be using. I know that it can get a little confusing out there, mainly for two different reasons. Some people go by weight, some people go by volume when they're talking about different ratios. And then the other thing is that not only is that it a science, when I say a science, not only is composting a science, it's an art as well. And by that I mean, I'm going to give you these ratios, but please keep in mind, don't treat them as gospel. Use it as a guide and then go from there. When you mix these materials up using the ratio that I give you, if it seems like your compost is drying out a little bit, add some more greens, add some more green materials, some more coffee grounds, some more spoiled food, things like that. If it starts to have like an ammonia smell, then you want to do the exact opposite. Add some more shredded cardboard in, some more shredded newspaper, any type of brown material that you have until you get the mix, correct. The ratio that I use is based on weight, not on volume. The guide that I use, for my own personal recipe is for about every 20 to 25 pounds of coffee grounds, I use about a ½ pound of cardboard paper products, shredded cardboard paper products, and about a ½ pound, usually closer to a ¼ pound, of newspaper and other paper related shredded products. I also throw in, whatever dryer lint that I have with me at that time to mix that in as well. This has served me well. Again, it's an art and a science. Sometimes it's a little off, so I have to add, either browns or greens, but overall, it's a good ratio and it's a good starting point for you in your compost bin. I do hope this video has helped you consider ways on how you can gather materials for free compost. If you have any questions or comments, please provide feedback below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you really enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel. You'll see the subscribe button. It's actually over here, that little icon right there. If you click on the icon, it'll subscribe you to our channel. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to provide a link to our Facebook group, Gardening for Beginners. If you're interested, please join our group. We'd love to have you. Thank you so much for watching, and happy gardening.